At the start of the last century, Indianapolis was like many growing cities and suffering from a lack of housing, especially quality rental housing and affordable housing for home ownership. With the building of new housing across the nation, explicit race-based zoning emerged as early as 1910 with formal prohibitions on African Americans purchasing property in majority white blocks, and vice versa. For Indianapolis and its suburbs, the growth of the Ku Klux Klan also began around the same time, creating a number of forces working to advance segregation. Let's explain. In 1917, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that racially based zoning was unconstitutional. This decision was a victory in the battle against racial segregation. However, it only applied to legal statutes or government actions, not what private citizens did through private actions. As a result, racially restrictive covenants, like this one in a still majority white neighborhood, banning home ownership opportunities due to race, religion, and national origin, became a common practice across the Indianapolis area to ensure segregated neighborhoods through their use of neighborhood memberships, making sure that blacks, amongst others, were shut out of most home purchases. If the covenants didn't work and blacks still moved into white neighborhoods, white neighbors would harass their black neighbors with structures like spike fences, which were tall fences that were erected on the white neighbors' sides to surround the black neighbors' property, impacting how they could enjoy their home. If that didn't work, whites would offer to buy the black homeowner out, again, keeping blacks from home ownership. In 1921, the U.S. Supreme Court endorsed these types of actions when it upheld Corrigan versus Buckley, a lower court ruling which allowed white property owners to protect their land from being sold to non-whites. Across Indiana, the KKK continued to build its membership, throwing parades and cross burnings across the state, further enabling discriminatory behavior from white property owners. In 1924, the National Association of Real Estate Boards added to the Realtor Code of Ethics. A realtor should never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood a character of property or occupancy, members of any race or nationality, or any individuals whose presence would clearly be detrimental to property values in that neighborhood. This solidified the role of the sales industry in securing and protecting white neighborhoods. Sadly, this language would remain in place in some form until the 1950s. In 1925, the KKK's Grand Dragon of Indiana, D.C. Stevenson, was tried and convicted of second-degree murder following his kidnapping and rape of an Indianapolis woman. The fallout revealed his close association to several Indiana politicians who influenced housing programs and access, including the governor, the mayor of Indianapolis, and other politicians who ultimately faced various charges. In Indianapolis, to bypass the Supreme Court's previous 1917 ruling, in 1926, the city of Indianapolis passed an ordinance which sought to prevent occupancy of residential property by persons of opposite color in defined areas without the consent of a majority of the residents in such areas. The ordinance was backed by the White People's Protective League, which had formed the year before, with the purpose to stop colored folks from moving into Indianapolis's white territories. Other similar groups formed across city neighborhoods. The ordinance was eventually found to be unconstitutional. However, the public support it generated fueled the real estate industry and white homeowners, continuing to restrict housing access. In the 2 decades that followed, we saw in Indianapolis and its suburbs the growth and aggressive expansion of racial covenants, coded as restricted development or restricted subdivisions. Across the country, rumors swirled about agents who attempted to sell homes to blacks in white neighborhoods being fined or losing their license, reinforcing that real estate agents be enforcers of racial covenants. Once again, blacks were kept away from home ownership. Around this same time, the U.S. was beginning what is our modern-day home financing system, which opened up home ownership opportunities to those who did not have the ability to purchase a home with cash. Unfortunately, the U.S. appraisal industry put its opposition to the mixing of races into action through property rating systems which rank properties, blocks, and neighborhoods with color-coded city maps, largely using the race, national origin, and religion of the residents as its main determinant for its rating. The Federal Housing Administration endorsed this system and used it through redlining maps to give banks and lenders direction on where they should make mortgage loans. The FHA's underwriting manual praised the use of restrictive covenants as the surest protection against undesirable encroachment or inharmonious racial groups. In fact, the FHA not only supported racial covenants, but often insisted upon them in order to provide the needed mortgage insurance for a loan to be made. This home financing system opened up homes to whites while restricting access to blacks and others, taking away opportunities for black families to build wealth that could be passed down. All the while, the racial covenants continued with more restricted developments. In 1948, the U.S. Supreme Court was in the news again with Shelley versus Kramer. The court finally ruled that although racial restrictive covenants were private, not government contracts, they are nonetheless legally unenforceable due to their violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Unfortunately, this still did not open up housing opportunities to those who had been targeted with restrictions. Problems continued through harassment of black families. Even as late as 1961, news stories highlighted vandalism of Indianapolis homes owned by blacks in white neighborhoods. It wasn't until 1964 that the Indianapolis Real Estate Board finally voted to remove its whites-only language for membership from its bylaws, and then welcomed its first black agent the following year. Indianapolis was one of the last major cities still having that language in place. And in contrast, during the same year, the Real Estate Board refused to support an Indianapolis Fair Housing Ordinance, which would have outlawed most forms of housing discrimination due to race, color, religion, national origin, or ancestry, stating that it was an invasion of the rights of property owners. Finally, in 1965, housing discrimination protections were added into the Indiana Civil Rights Act, marking the first legislative action for fair housing opportunity in Indiana. Then, in 1968, the Federal Fair Housing Act was passed. Even despite the passage of fair housing laws, housing discrimination did not go away. In the 1970s, Indianapolis fought school desegregation and busing, all built upon neighborhood segregation. Today, home ownership gaps between blacks and whites are as large as they were in the 1930s. In recent years, reports of sales discrimination show real estate agents refusing to show homes or steering potential homeowners to certain neighborhoods due to their race or national origin. All of this explains why our neighborhoods remain so segregated and how equal access to home ownership has been kept away from so many. The Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana needs your help. For more information, visit fhcci.org.